I believe we are live for a Google Plus Hangout titled Cause for a New Generation, and today we are exploring how youth lead and will continue to lead in the future. I am joined by a range of panelists, and I'd like to start off by introducing them one by one. I'll read their names, and they'll say hi so you can see their picture and you know who they are. So first off, we have Tina Wells.
Hi.
And Tina is CEO and founder of Buzz Marketing Group, and she serves on a range of boards and directorships from the Philadelphia Orchestra or Association to the Franklin Institute to the Young Entrepreneur Council. She is a dynamo, and we're pleased to have her on our panel. Next, we have Adnani Adwi. Adnani, are you with us? Okay, Adnani is chair of the Moroccan Center for Innovation and Social Entrepreneurship and Country Leadership for Enactus Morocco. He is a pioneer in social entrepreneurship, training, and coaching in the MENA region with a focus on systematic change. So hopefully we can hear a little bit from him as the conversation progresses. Next we have Saskia.
Hi everyone.
Saskia Schellekens is Special Advisor to the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth at the United Nations, Ahmed Al-Fandawi. And hopefully our students will know who that is. If not, we can brush over his office as the conversation progresses. And next we have Eloise Todd. Eloise, say hi for us.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Eloise Todd is the Global Policy Director at the One Campaign in Washington, D.C. And One is an international campaigning and advocacy organization of more than 6 million people taking action to end extreme poverty and preventable diseases worldwide. So an awesome panel we have going so far. And again, our next panelist is Megan Stone.
Hi, how are you? And I'm really excited about the students, I have to say. Everyone at the Malala Fund is really happy to be part of this. Thanks.
Great. So Megan is, as she mentioned, from the Malala Fund, and it's an organization that we've all heard a lot about recently, centered on human rights and social good worldwide in concert with, of course, the famed Malala. And last, but certainly not least, we have Professor Matt Cohn and his Global Health Club students. Come on, let's give a warm welcome for them. There they are. So hopefully we can hear from the students from a real youth perspective, one-on-one. So those are our panelists. I hope you're enjoying the live conversation so far. I'm going to start it off with a question directed toward Saskia, and it's just a general question. I want to kind of posit, we hear a lot about MDGs and SDGs at the United Nations, and what does it mean for youth in the transition from MDGs to SDGs in terms of health, education, reproductive rights? How do youth fit into this transition?
Thank you so much, Jackson, for this question. And greetings to everyone, and also warm greetings from Ahmed Al-Fandawi, the Envoy on Youth. He regrets that he couldn't make it himself for this Google Hangout. But it's a very important question that you're posing, Jackson, and we've all been hearing a lot about this. I think what's critical about this transition from going from the Millennium Development Goals that were adopted by member states in 2000 with a time span of 15 years to this year, 2015, for their implementation and progress on their achievement, is that this transition offers a lot of opportunities to get things right this time around. What we've seen with the Millennium Development Goals is that they were 8 goals, and they have been widely endorsed by the international community, and there's been a lot of effort done in terms of implementing them and making progress towards them. But what we see from the perspective of young people and youth around the world is that youth issues were largely not sufficiently addressed in this set of goals. And we've seen a lot of activity, advocacy, partnering amongst young people, youth organizations, youth-led networks, as well as UN agencies that have a mandate on youth issues to work together to see that in the forthcoming Sustainable Development Goals, youth issues and youth priorities are well addressed. We have already seen a lot of activity over the past months and year, particularly also in the development of what is called the Global Youth Call, which indeed addresses some of these important topics within the team of young people and youth, including, as you mentioned, employment, education, health, including sexual and reproductive health for young people. And that document presents an emerging consensus around what should be youth priorities and targets in the Sustainable Development Goals. And this has been presented to member states here at the United Nations last year during the ECOSOC Youth Forum, and we'll continue to feature and filter into the discussions here at the United Nations in the coming months, particularly also in what's one of the first building steps in going forward is the next ECOSOC Youth Forum, which is around the corner and will happen on the 2nd and 3rd of February. So in a few weeks from now, and we'll particularly focus on this theme, and has also the title of the transition of the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals and the youth engagement in that. So thank you very much for the question, Jackson.
Absolutely. So yeah, we've heard a lot, as Saskia mentioned, that transition from MDGs to SDGs and the importance of various conferences or organizational events that occur at the United Nations, such as ECOSOC, which is something we tend to say. We have a lot of acronyms at the UN. So in going with those acronyms, SDGs, MDGs, I want to continue the question with Megan and kind of looking at what Malala Fund is doing. So why exactly is Malala calling on leaders to guarantee a free, quality, and universal secondary education in the SDGs that we're talking about?
Thanks so much. Well, it's actually the heart and soul of what her work is. You know, as an adolescent girl, she's 17. You know, she really strongly believes that a quality secondary education is the pathway for girls to really globally realize all of their potential and become agents of change in their own communities. And when, you know, we talk about education, there's been really incredible progress so far on primary education. You know, we hear the number 58 million children that are still out of school, but we have to keep in mind that that number actually only captures the number of children who are out of primary school. And just like any of us, in the global north, in countries like the United States or around the world, we want our children to go to school, not just stop at 5th or 6th grade, but continue all the way through the age of 18. This is a goal that hasn't been agreed by the international community yet. You know, and Malala strongly believes that every girl and every child deserves the opportunity to become a student all the way through the age of 18 and reach their full potential, not just achieve basic literacy or basic numeracy, but to study topics like algebra and calculus and physics, just like any other student would globally. But unless leaders agree that we should have not only a free but quality secondary education and that it's universal to every student, we won't be able to achieve that, and nor will we be able to count what our progress is against it. So she's calling on leaders today, along with everyone else who signed the letter on behalf of Action 2015, to really enshrine secondary education in the new SDGs.
Great. Okay, great. Sorry, there's a delay on my end. So yeah, continuing with that inclusion part in the SDGs and with you know, over 50 million individuals that we're talking about in regards to education, primary education, secondary education. In other factors of the Sustainable Development Goals and youth leadership, Tina, I'd like to come to you next with maybe some input from Eloise continued. How do we ensure that no one else is left behind in the development process and incorporating youth leadership into the development process continually? How do we do that?
Thank you so much. So one of the campaigns that I was able to participate in, thanks to the UN Foundation, was My World 2015. I thought this was an incredible campaign that really allowed millennials to make sure their voice was heard. And there was a survey where you had 16 options of things that really mattered to you, and you were asked to select 6. And I think just being able to see what young people think and feel all over the world and just getting their thoughts and opinions is a great place to start. Research is something that I'm obviously really passionate about, and I was amazed to see that, what mattered to young people in Norway can be very different than what matters to young people in Jordan. And so having the ability to see that and to really continue to include the voice of young people is something I feel is really important. You know, I think at this point we have over 2 million young people that have contributed their thoughts and opinions, and I think we need much more. And I think that, you know, data is a great way to really get that quantitative, you know, perspective. And what I'm really interested in is how do we then layer that with more of a qualitative perspective, and what does that mean? Is it more interview style videos? You know, what other things can we do to make sure that we continue to hear their voice? But for me, My World 2015 was a great way to start. Okay, excellent. And My World 2015, building from that and sort of platforms that enable youth engagement, I believe Adnani Advi has joined the conversation. Adnani, can you hear me? Yeah?
I can. Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Excellent. So I'd like to kind of pause at the next question in your direction. With your systematic leadership and all the experience that you bring to the table, how can we continue to create platforms for youth engagement? And from your experience, what is some of the most effective means to do this? And where have you seen achievement, again, from your experience bringing to the table, how can we do this and continue moving forward with youth leadership?
Well, I think that regarding the platform, the main component is inspiration. From what I see wherever I go, whether it's in North Africa, Morocco, whatever the Arab world, or whatever we name it, the thing that drives change is the ability to create a continuous process of inspiration. So platforms, I would say to some extent, the more often we get, more traction we can deliver. But at the same time, connecting inspiration and connecting change makers or wannabe change makers is a good way to ignite this change. The second element regarding the platform is actually, I would think that it has to be focused on tangible issues. For example, talking about climate change or talking about poverty is, of course, a huge issue, but it's too generic. Whether, for example, you say, okay, so focus is job creation or youth unemployment in a specific region, by giving concrete examples, can ignite a level of engagement from youth and from different stakeholders. So I think that the inspiration and the practicality and the focusedness of the issues can create and drive a positive action towards a global ideal.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, the inspirational aspect is certainly huge, and as you mentioned, the focus on tangible outcomes or tangible solutions to what we're seeking to accomplish. And with that inspirational part, I'd like to go to the students now and hear a little bit from them, which I'm super excited to hear what they have to say. So we're all young students, right? According to the International Labor Organization, there are 73 million youths worldwide who are seeking employment. That's a hefty number. So where do you think, as students, should governments invest to ensure that jobs and financial capital exist for us, youth of today, for tomorrow's jobs? And if you want to take a minute and discuss really briefly, or if they have a spokesperson, that'd be great. So what do you think about this? Where should governments invest in jobs for tomorrow?
I'll tell you what, if you can give us 15 seconds, we'll give you a great answer.
That's awesome. We'll give you 15 seconds. Okay, in those 15 seconds...
What's on the clock?
15 seconds, you're on the clock, students. Get with it. Let's go and discuss that number, 73 million youth. And I want to come back to Adnani really briefly. So what are some of the differences you see between the global north and the global south when we're talking about youth who are looking for jobs, who have job prospects, and when you're creating programs for youth and youth leadership, how do you balance the global north versus the global south and this number that varies between the two?
Well, I would like first to challenge the idea of the global north and the global south. From where I stand, it does not mean anything for the moment. Is the global north including Brazil or China, or is it including other parts of the world? But moving beyond this, I think that the focus is about getting young people to be responsible of their own futures. For example, I just finished the signing an MOU with the local education authority, where we're now targeting high school students and primary school students actually to get them understand that their future is their own. So I think one difference between various kind of societies is the whole idea of responsibility. We have some societies where youth are given the ownership and given the empowerment needed at a very young age to be able to decide and take initiatives for their own, where in other societies it's more dependent or either on the state or the parents or the families. So the main challenge is getting this idea of responsibility. Secondly, is getting enough trust and confidence so that young people can actually be independent for their own and then shift the mind to be job creators. And from where I stand, not only job creators per se, but job creators for the greater good, which means if there is an issue, fix it by your own, and it has to 1 + 1, which means you benefit from it and the whole society has to benefit from it. So, so to sum up, the main difference is the idea of ownership and responsibility. So I think that programs and activities that target much younger children or young adults, it's very important to give them practical hands-on tools to be owners of their own futures and to give the challenge and the legitimacy around the global society of that, yes, I can be 12 or I can be 13 and I can hire another person and I can create something without having the taboo that societies sometimes create for younger generations.
Great, excellent. So with that brief break, students, what can we hear from you in where government should invest for job creation in the future?
So I'd like to introduce, this is Jordan Owen, and Jordan is a senior here, and we're hoping she may get into a college, but we kind of doubt it. And Jordan has been doing this for 4 years, and she's been able to pick the brains of lots of people. She's talked to Jeff Sachs, she's talked to Nina Monk, she's talked to Jim Kim, Paul Farmer, Howard Buffett. So she knows how complicated these issues are, and I'm curious to hear what she has to say.
Set the bar very high for me, Mr. Cohn. So I think that like the majority, like the obvious answer here might be education. But I think that the how is definitely really important and really, really complex. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned from like 4 years of doing Global Health Club and reading all these books is that like there's never a simple answer, and I'm sure that you all can attest to that. So I mean, like there's everything from like just building roads so people can get to school, or making sure that people are dewormed. Esther Duflo did a lot of experiments about that, and so it turned out to be the cheapest way to get people into school. I mean, in this country, the issues like might be are significantly different than in developing countries, but I think at the same time, like we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of hungry people in this country. Especially after talking to Howard Buffett last week, he was, he's all about trying to end food insecurity, and not just abroad, where it seems like people are kind of romanticized about giving aid abroad. So I think having systems in place that invest in low-achieving schools, and honestly, trying to even find a measure for achievement is very, very difficult. My state has had some big issues with that recently. But investing in schools, and then also the parts of children's lives that are really important, like food and basic care from their families, a loving environment so that they can focus on education. I mean, I know it's a very broad answer, but there really isn't a simple one. Otherwise, we would have already solved this.
That's an excellent response. Touche, well put. So thank you very much, Jordan, and the class in general. I want to go to Eloise now, who has been very patiently waiting. Thank you very much for the patience there. So I want to talk about one campaign and what you're doing currently with this organization, and specifically in extreme poverty amelioration and the eradication, hopefully, of preventable diseases. How do those two things impact youth today? Where do you hope that they will go in the next 15, 20 years? And how can, as youth leaders today, how can we tackle these issues? Go for it.
Thanks very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you all, and great to hear from the students there. I mean, at One, we are an advocacy and campaigning organisation, and what I've noticed when we work with our young members and the youthful members that we have, they make our work so much easier. And in fact, it's only working in partnership with them that we can actually make change happen. So, for example, this morning, or rather, when we were still asleep in Europe, there were 15-year-olds that were going to talk to ex-President Sarkozy in France and the development minister in France, and they went to the Bundestag in Germany, and they've been meeting with, some others have been meeting with Prime Minister David Cameron today as well. And I know that from my experience with One, that when we take young people to meet with politicians, there's the creativity that they can often bring, and the just the fresh approach. Just totally, it acts like a bit of a truth serum for politicians, and they end up sort of having to tell the truth. It's amazing. So I kind of watch and learn and really enjoy working with young people on that score. So what do we need to do? I mean, this year, the whole excitement of the Action 2015 coalition is that we need to make more noise than we've ever made before collectively, and we need to make it absolutely impossible for leaders to ignore the pressure and the desire for change that we need to see. We've made a lot of great progress on some key development priorities. Child mortality is down. You know, we're really making good progress in the fight against extreme poverty, but we can't be complacent. The economic crisis has been quite hard, and that means that politicians often make different choices with where to spend their money. And so it's really important that the people of the future, the citizens of the future, young people, rise up and say, we care about a global system where everybody has the right opportunities, that the people in the poorest areas, the hardest to reach, are put first. And so basically we need to work with young people all over the world to make sure that politicians don't have a way out. So that's what we're trying to do at the One campaign and as part of the 2015 coalition. And I know that those students there do a fantastic job of taking the issues and haranguing people and making change happen. So thank you to them for that.
Excellent. We're not nearly midway through, so if you're just joining us, we're talking about and we're exploring how youth lead and will continue to lead in the future. The title of this talk is Cause for a New Generation, so if you're just joining us, welcome. In making noise, kind of indignez-vous, you know, getting out there and being sure that politicians are paying attention to youth needs, I want to turn back to the Malala Fund, because Malala is very good at this. She's very good at making noise and making sure that politicians and political leaders are paying attention to the needs of everyday citizens. So coming back to you, Megan, Malala brought some young girls with her to the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. Now, I want you to talk about that a little bit. What was she trying to say to the leaders about the power of youth, and particularly girls, in this gesture, in this message that she did?
You know, it was really important to Malala to bring other young women with her, girls her age who were 15, 16, 17, when she got the Nobel Peace Prize, because she said so many times, you know, people may be inspired by her story as one girl, but she's much more interested in them thinking about the millions of other girls who are asking for the same thing, listening to the voices of so many other girls that need to be heard. And she always says, you know, I am one girl. I'm not just one girl, but I'm one of many. You know, and she brought with her several girls. She brought with her a girl, Amina, from northern Nigeria, where, you know, we all know that Boko Haram abducted over 200 schoolgirls and continues even very recently, tragically, to have a campaign of violence there that's preventing many girls from going to school. She brought Amina there so that Amina could speak out on her own behalf and say how she feels as a young Nigerian girl and woman about how she feels about her right to an education, and put on full display, you know, the incredible capability and potential that she embodies from the moment that you start speaking to her. And instead of other people speaking out on her behalf, having her speak out. She brought with her another young woman named Mazoon, who's a Syrian refugee living right now in a camp in Jordan, and letting Mazoon speak out about her hopes and dreams. She wants to be a journalist one day and do a lot of the same kind of thing that Malala does, you know, talking to leaders and asking them tough questions and asking for good answers back. You know, and so the hope in bringing these girls to this really austere, incredible ceremony was to not just have one young person there, but to have 5, 6, 7 young people there, and to have the press that gathered, not just talking to Malala, one girl, but to hear from other girls from other parts of the world as well. You know, and I think we see this all the time, that some of the most important places where the world gathers to make these decisions and gain inspiration, you really can't find a young person. You know, I think we have a lot of wonderful events where we gather youth to make their voices heard, but not as many events where we put youth in the same room as leaders to make their opinions heard. You know, it's not just about development as young people, it's making sure that leaders hear the voices of young people in real ways, and not just young people from, like the former speaker said, the global north, you know, or global south, but a diverse group, you know, youth from every country, you know, girls and boys, young men, young women from all regions, being able to say what they really think is important, because they're the ones that have to live with what this SDG agenda is going to achieve. You know, it's not us who are gathering in these high and mighty rooms, it's really them. They are the ones that are going to have to live with either success or failure in what the Action 2015 Coalition is calling for. So it's important that we hear from them in a real substantive way.
Excellent. And yeah, I definitely echo that, the importance of gathering youth together and creating outlets or necessarily platforms to discuss ideas and to discuss movements and to really take the momentum from there. So in gathering youth together, I want to go to Saskia for the next kind of question. Saskia and I were both fortunate enough to attend the Global Youth Policy Forum in Baku, Azerbaijan in late October of 2014. And Saskia, I would really love it if you elaborated on that function, that forum, and kind of tell us why those fora are necessary, elaborating on what Megan just said, for youth development and youth networking and youth leadership cultivation.
Sure. Thank you, Jackson. Just to explain a little bit about the context of this forum, as you might not all be aware of it. This was a forum that was organized by the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, together with UNESCO and UNDP, and then also the Council of Europe, and it took place in October in Baku, in Azerbaijan. And the forum offered an opportunity to look at the past years, past 2 decades really, how countries have been progressing in terms of implementing youth policies. You know that many countries do have youth policies. However, what we often experience is that implementation tends to be lagging. There's sometimes a lack of coordination between different sectors because, as you know, the youth agenda is a broad agenda that has many cross-cutting issues that come in: employment, education, health, some of which were already mentioned before. And also oftentimes what we experience is that governments tend to not invest sufficient budgets in these youth policies and their implementation. So this forum offered an opportunity 20 years since the adoption of the World Programme of Action for Youth that was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1995, to really look with a multitude of stakeholders, so to see what progress has been made, but also to look at forward and also link it to the post-2015 development agenda to see what needs to happen from here on to improve this. So what we did was we brought together member states. All member states of the United Nations were invited, but also very importantly we brought together youth groups that have been very closely involved in this field, and youth leaders, as well as academia and research networks that have been very closely monitoring and reviewing and assessing these youth policies and their implementation. So the forum was actually the very first since 1998, where we had an opportunity to bring the highest level of government representatives. Most ministers of youth and sports attended the forum from around the world, as well as you know, the other stakeholders that I mentioned, and it really created a momentum to take youth policies seriously again, and to, as I said, feature it into the ongoing other international debates that are happening and that are so important this year. So the forum generated this momentum also by the launch of a global initiative on youth policies that will be rolling out as the United Nations to support countries better in the development of youth policies and their implementation, and this will you know, start piloting hopefully in the coming months. So I hope maybe in a next opportunity to engage with you, we can inform you on how that's being done and what will be the, you know, the next steps for this initiative, and hopefully in the coming period to also report to you if there have been indeed these improvements that we are looking for. And of course, in all of this, it's incredibly important to us how we dare bring together also these partners in the actual development and implementation of national youth policies, particularly also bringing in youth voices and the variety of youth voices that are there at the national and other levels.
Excellent. And on that topic of bringing in youth voices at the national and international and various levels of operation, I'm going to posit a question to the students and then go back to Tina for a little bit to give them to prepare. So students, you are members of the Global Health Club. So I want to ask you, how can youth become leaders in global health crises worldwide, and especially considering the amount of training it takes to become a physician or to become a health practitioner? How can we as youth become leaders in global health crises? On the clock. And now, with that, take your time. I want to turn to Tina. And Tina, your resume is incredible. You do all sorts of things. You're involved in cultural endeavors. You're involved in entrepreneurship. So I want to talk a little bit about culture. And especially your role on the board of directors for the Philadelphia Orchestra Association. A lot of times when we look at youth leadership, we tend to forget the cultural component, or at least the millennial generation, we think aculturally at times. So how can youth, with their respective cultures, become leaders in those various, not necessarily fields, but cultural aspects, and maintain their culture in a globalized setting? Because culture is incredibly important. I don't want to lose my culture. I want to talk about it. I want to share it, but I also want to learn from others. So how do we maintain that identity in a globalized world?
Thank you. That's a great question. So it's funny you talk about the Philadelphia Orchestra. I don't know if most people know, but the Philadelphia Orchestra was actually the first American orchestra to play in China. And we continue to have a celebrated partnership with China and do extensive touring there. And it's also something that is praised by the Secretary of State. So I think looking at art, when we talk about culture, I think we always see art paired with culture, and really thinking about art as a great communicator and as a tool that sometimes communicates things that we can't even find the words to say. So I'd say, what does your art say about you, about your culture, and how do you use that as a medium to communicate those thoughts? And then when you really think about youth worldwide, we, obviously in my line of work, I deal a lot with entertainers. There is something to, the cultural impact that global celebrities, have around the world, and their ability to help drive conversations on issues that matter. We've seen actresses like Emma Watson come and speak at the UN on behalf of causes that she's passionate about. Obviously, Angelina Jolie is someone that's been doing that for the majority of her career. So it's not a new idea, but I think the pairing of art, artists and culture in the conversation is something that's incredibly important.
Right, pairing artist and culture in the conversation. And those goodwill ambassadors they carry incredible weight. Leonardo DiCaprio, Emma Watson, Angelina Jolie, young people listen to them, and you're incredibly right in that regard. So with that in mind, let's go to our young panelists, our students, and hear what they have to say with becoming leaders in global health crises. Students, you're on.
Hi, I'm Ellie, and I actually wanted to talk a little bit about an experience that I've had in this sort of thing. I was an exchange student last year in India, and you know, I had read a ton about poverty and inequalities in Mr. Cohn's class before, but I think, you know, going to a country where, you know, there's this extreme debilitating poverty everywhere really kind of brought home all of these issues for me. And so I think, you know, my experience in India, like, I will never forget some of the scenes I saw there. You know, I saw, you know, a young girl who was about 9 years old defecating in the street one time, and it just really kind of made me think, you know, that's something that people in the U.S. will, like, very few people in the U.S. will ever have to experience themselves. And so it just made me think, you know, I think kind of for young people who might feel that they don't have much of a voice right now or much that they can do right now, you know, being an exchange student and going abroad and, you know, seeing these issues for themselves, that's something that I will never forget and I know will, you know, impact my work for the rest of my life. And so I think that's really important.
Hi, my name's Leah. I'm a junior here, and I would jump in and say that one thing that we talk a lot about is that you don't have to be a physician in order to change the world or stand up for what you believe in. And so there are different ways to go about it, millions of different ways to go about it, probably infinite ways to go about it. And one thing that we talk a lot about also is that it's important to be an unrelenting advocate for free speech and to stand up for important policy, especially in the United States, where we're able to do so regardless of our age. And so it's to talk to senators and legislators and make sure that they know what our concerns are. We think that's incredibly important.
Excellent. Yeah, both standing up for our rights and standing up for what we believe in and what our morals are as youth, and standing up for those who don't necessarily have the ability or the platform or the political opportunity to do so is hugely important. So you're absolutely right in those regards. So in bolstering support, in standing up for ourselves, often it's useful to have a base to call on, or not necessarily a following, but a support group. So I want to go back to Eloise again and talk about the one campaign which has 6 million people taking action on these causes. 6 million people. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of supporters. How do you kind of maintain a support base that large and coordinate efforts with that many people? I mean, how do we even go about communicating with that many people as youth when that's what we want in our political causes? We want that much support for what we believe in.
Thank you. Great question. So we have 6 million members, which is very exciting, and we're particularly excited about the fact that 2 million, more than 2 million of those are in sub-Saharan Africa, and that increase has been in the last couple of years. So how do we communicate with our members? Well, you know, that includes a broad spectrum of people, lots of young people, lots of people on campuses across the US and in other countries as well, forming clubs and getting people active. It also includes older people, people that click on our petitions and contribute that way. And basically, if young people or people of any age have time and they want to volunteer and spread the word about why people should care about development, we want them on board. And we try to create these opportunities to work together with our members so that, that we take them with us when we go to meet the politicians and we campaign alongside them. And we get ideas from them. We brainstorm with our members as well. I remember last year we were trying to get a lot of money out of the European Union for HIV/AIDS, TB and malaria, the Global Fund. And we had a session with our members where they made these amazing collages, which we presented to the European Commissioner for Development. And he was completely blown away by this sort of creativity and this very human interpretation of what this meant to these young people. And I was there with my boring lines about, you know, exactly what the numbers should be. And he was just absolutely marveling at these pieces of artwork. So things like that, you know, it just injects freshness, creativity, enthusiasm into our work. And yeah, I love it too, because selfishly it keeps us fresh.
Excellent. Yeah, keeping ourselves fresh and developing those varied channels for communicating with a wide support base is incredibly important and takes a lot of skill and a lot of depth in that area. So I want to kind of transition into entrepreneurship a little bit, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about youth leadership, present and future, cause for new generation. So I want to go to Adnani Adwi. What exactly is social entrepreneurship, and how are youth becoming leaders in this field, and especially in entrepreneurship? When we talk about youth globally, we talk about entrepreneurship a lot. And I heard something recently from an Australian professor who said sometimes people say entrepreneurship because they're scared to say we don't have enough jobs for the young generation. So what is social entrepreneurship? How are youth becoming leaders in this field? Go for it.
Well, I'd like to start with the professor from Australia, where he told you. I think that it's sadly in countries in transitions, whether economically or politically, whether it's in North Africa, Southeast Asia, or even Sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of people use the word entrepreneurship as a kind of it's something for the jobless. So instead of people like waiting on the streets and asking for the government to get them jobs and other people to get them jobs, okay, they just get them into small businesses to get them self-employed. I think it's a dangerous cancer for me, because entrepreneurship at first is the fact that somebody takes an initiative to change his own condition, which is not something that is ignited through an external factor. It's more inhibited in you. And usually an entrepreneur is a person who doesn't like something, or he finds that there is a need somewhere, and he goes and does something. So the social part of it is basically, so it's answering a social need, not a market need. Like all these like business professors, they would say you have the concept of market failure. What is market failure is when you have something that the government or the existing private sector does not give a proper answer, whether it's including what we call the bottom of the pyramid, which is the extreme poor, or providing services that people don't have access to. So that I think that in some places of the world, the entrepreneurship has become a buzzword that is so democratized, whether you're in Silicon Valley or in hubs in London, that it's trendy, that your fate is not doomed to your job. In other parts, entrepreneurship is what creates growth, is what creates jobs, is what creates a social justice. So the challenge that now we have to face is getting, as I was saying in the beginning, young people to take ownership of their own lives and then to be their own job creators. In the sense that instead of waiting that somebody fixes your own backyard, you go and fix it by your own. And then you don't limit yourself to your own backyard, because it's a shared backyard, which is the global world. So that everybody, like the famous "go and change the world" idea, that we all live in one garden. That if I fix my part of this garden, the global garden will be all benefit from it.
Excellent. So yeah, taking kind of moving beyond our own backyard and taking the initiative to fix whatever issues we may have or whatever problems we may encounter. Taking that initiative, and as has been mentioned a few times, kind of speaking up, having, if you're in a certain situation where you have clout or political clout or personal empowerment, speaking up when you can and speaking up for those who maybe don't have the same opportunity. And talking about not necessarily market failure, but maybe disenfranchisement, moving along, I want to go to Saskia and talk about disenfranchisement for youth. So when youth are disenfranchised, there's a huge problem. I mean, we can't identify with our society, we can't identify with the marketplace, we can't potentially identify with one another. What are some of the avenues we can employ now to give disenfranchised youth a purpose and meaning before they may turn to alternate activities that don't necessarily have a positive purpose or meaning.
Yeah, thank you, Jackson. A very important question, and a very complex question too, and especially what we've seen also again last week and the events that happened in Paris, and I think it's on everybody's mind, and the solutions for which I think as a global community we're all responsible for looking into. And what we know, for instance, it's the numbers are just staggering. When we look at young people living in refugee settings, we know that only 20% of those young people have access to secondary education. So it raises a lot of questions of how are you going to be meaningfully engaged in your society and in social life, and what will be your opportunities for jobs, for employment, for decent work. So these are very critical topics, and from the perspective of our office, we always advocate for ensuring meaningful youth participation wherever the Envoy travels and meets with government representatives and world leaders. These are always issues that are on the agenda for discussion, where we try to seek to open up as many avenues as possible for ensuring there's more and more meaningful civic engagement, and that young people's rights and needs are addressed. I think an important issue in general in when we talk about youth development is in the engagement with policymakers and leaders, to also seek to change the narrative and the framing of young people. Young people are often seen as the troublemakers, as the ones that are engaged as combatants in conflict, and the perpetrators of violence. And of course, we know that to some extent that this is also the reality. But on the other hand, I think it's important to also emphasize that the majority of young people don't engage in these kinds of behaviors and want to see a peaceful and society, and one that respects human rights of all. So I think that the framing of the debate and the discussion is an important thing that we can all contribute to, and to remind ourselves of these things. And we will, as an international community, need to continue to have these discussions in an open way, with the participation of young people that can speak on their own right. Very important issues to look also into as we move forward to the Sustainable Development Goals, and as they are being decided, as I think within the section that deals with inclusive societies. These are very important, particularly as they relate to youth and the transition from childhood to adulthood, that there are some measures in place that are guaranteed for young people. I am very sorry to say, and must apologize myself, I have another engagement also with high school students, in fact, here at the UN, that is going to start shortly. So I will have to say goodbye to everyone, and thank you very much for having me in the Google Hangout. I very much enjoyed this, and particularly a warm goodbye to the students. And I'm very impressed by how you raised the issues that you brought forward, and I think it gives a lot of food for thought for all of us here. So thanks again for having me.
Me too. I'm going to have to go. Thank you so much on behalf of one.org, and thank you for letting me be a part of this. And keep going, students, with your amazing work.
Excellent. Thank you both for joining in the panel. It was an honor to discuss some of the issues of the day with you. We still have a couple panelists, and we still have a little bit of time, so if our remaining panelists can remain on the line, we can talk about some more topics in depth just for our listeners. So thank you, Saskia, and thank you, Eloise, very much for your input. Now, moving on, I want to continue what Saskia mentioned to the students and give them a little bit of time to think about this next question on changing the narrative of young people. Okay, young people worldwide, you know, as Saskia mentioned, we have a reputation of being troublemakers. You know, if we're talking about young leaders in the American political system, for example, in the Senate or in the House, there's a little bit of edge. Ooh, you know, they're under 40. Ooh, I don't know if that's a good thing. So how do we change the narrative surrounding youth? How do we do that? What are the avenues as young people that we can employ ourselves to change that narrative and to change those stereotypes? So go, brainstorm. And
Hey, can I say something first?
Yes, absolutely.
But I think, you know, what you referenced, the idea that students are apathetic or apolitical, you almost never hear that from teachers, right? You know, you hear that from people who are not very clued in. And I would say a couple things about these students, and then they'll speak for themselves, but one of the things I think we do wrong as a society is we expect so little from young people, and we give them access to so little that's actually interesting and complex. And then we're surprised when we don't get good results. But at our school, the students aim really high. So when they were raising money for Partners in Health Ebola clinics, they tried to raise $50,000, mainly through $25 donations. And every one of us was scared we wouldn't make it. And in the end, we made it, and that's great. But I think what's even more impressive to me is the audacity to aim high. And another thing about them, too, is I think there's a sense sometimes you have to trick students into caring. But I think it's the exact opposite. I think what you have to do is you have to roll the ball out. And by that I mean you watch a good documentary, you read a complex book, you talk to people with different ideas, and then students who naturally have a moral instinct, like all of us, but who don't throw in the towel, like many of us adults, will get after it in a variety of ways, many of which couldn't be predicted by adults anyhow. And so again, I just think that's such a false characterization, and it wouldn't come from people who are close with students anyhow. I'll shut up, I'll let them talk, and then we'll get back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cohn. Yeah, that's totally valid and completely something that we should consider when we're setting the bar for our young people. We don't expect a lot of young people, or we don't expect a lot from young people, rather, you know. And so when we do accomplish something, there's a huge hype. Wow, you actually did that? That surprises me. So, you know, kind of keeping that in mind, Malala is just 17. So, Megan, I'm coming back to you. She is just 17, but she's really an example of how young people can speak out on issues that matter to them with leaders and kind of challenge that notion that we can't or don't have the ability to accomplish a lot. So what are Malala and the Malala Fund doing to help ensure the voices of even more girls will be heard in this context?
You know, one thought just to start on what the teacher was just sharing and about youth engagement, you know, I think people don't give young people any credit. I don't think they engage in the system in which they know there's no actual impact, you know, and I think too many times leaders, NGOs, you know, people in authority, we create like youth consultation mechanisms, or, you know, we have a youth summit, but if that's actually not substantively impacting where the real decision making is happening, I think young people figure that out very quickly. You know, they don't want another club or another activity. They want to have meaning behind what they're doing. You know, and in Malala's case, you know, she is in a very unique place where a president, a prime minister, a parliament will sit with her and listen to her. And, you know, she's very forthright in what she says. And they do respond in a very candid way often, like the previous speaker was saying. But I think her interest, our interest in the Malala Fund, is creating more mechanisms for more young people to be able to do that. And not just young people in, again, what we call the global north or in developed countries, but young people, young girls especially, adolescent girls in developing countries. You know, I think when we look at the debate or even some of the conversations happening today, you know, we see Action 2015 helping push out some of these young voices from around the world, so that when we talk about youth engagement, you know, it's not just American youth coming together or British youth coming together or German or France. It's coming together with young people from Pakistan and young people from India and, you know, young people from, you know, Ghana and Kenya, and coming together in a substantive way. So Malala's vision and our mission at the Malala Fund is to find substantive ways to empower girls, to have their voices be heard, and find ways, because Malala is a door opener to people in elected positions of authority, to actually connect with young people in their own countries, so that it's not this echo chamber where it's only this disconnected decision making that's not happening with real representation from young girls particularly.
Excellent. So with that, hopefully the students have had time to compile a response. So I want to go directly to the students.
I'm Sadie. I'm a sophomore, and I think something that contributes to a lot of the negative stereotypes about students and them being problematic and not really caring has to do with the media and kind of the media's portrayals of young people. But I think this image is already changing with the emergence of social media and young people's involvement with social media. And if we can kind of change the credibility of social media and let young people have more of a voice on this platform, we can kind of create more of a positive image for young people.
Hi, I'm Millie, and I'm a freshman, and coming to this school this year, last year I was at the same school for 10 years, and it's sort of like, after a while you get into kind of like a lull, and you're like, oh, what am I really doing? And coming to this school, I realized how easy it is to like get involved with things, and I just stepped in, and everyone was like, come join this club, come join this club, and Mr. Cohn was one of the first teachers that I talked to, and he was like, look, we do all this great stuff. And I was like, yeah, let's join it. And I really didn't know like what was going on or what was going to happen, but I realized how easy it was to actually get involved. And I think that's something that people don't realize, that if you just like stop and look around, you can find something that you're passionate about and that doesn't just better you, but betters everyone else. Okay.
Great, yeah. Oh, we have one more. Oh, exciting. Okay, go for it.
Hi, I'm Grace, and so I'm a freshman, and I know that some people aren't super stubborn, but some are like really stubborn and love to prove people wrong when they know that they can, like myself. So if somebody ever says that I can't do something, I always want to go out of my way to prove that I can do it. And so I try to like prove that I can, and so I think trying to like change the stereotype would be like trying to get young people to like put themselves out there and like show everyone what they are capable of and show them that they really can make a difference and that might help.
Excellent, excellent. Putting ourselves out there, standing up, making some noise, and trying to change that political narrative that we hear so often, trying to really challenge it. We only have about 4 minutes left, so I want to go to each of our 3 remaining panelists, unless Tina is still out there, but I think she had to go for another appointment. So I want to go to each of our 3 remaining panelists, Avni, the class, and, Megan, and just hear 2 words, 3 words on youth leadership today versus the future. Megan, you're on the floor.
Well, I just want to say it's been great to hear from all the young women, especially today in the classroom, because that's exactly what Malala's heart and vision is through fighting for a quality secondary education for girls globally. And I love the last speaker talked about being stubborn. You know, Malala talked about that in her Nobel Peace Prize speech. She said, I'm even a stubborn girl. You know, so I think the best thing that youth can do is be unreasonable. You know, Bill and Melinda Gates would say you're being an impatient optimist. And those are great characteristics, you know, that not just the young women and girls who spoke today should be able to deepen and have, but girls globally. So, you know, keep fighting, I would say, and keep being unreasonable until leaders hear what you have to say, because the SDG agenda, what Action 2015 is calling for, it's the future of your world. It's the world that you're going to inherit and you're going to lead in. So keep speaking out.
And Adnani, Advi?
I would say I like the unreasonable part. And I think that one major thing that makes things happen is being crazy and challenging whatever status quo exists. And the message that I would need to give now for the youth, because not everybody has the same opportunities to go and do something. But the message is more for enablers in organizations that has to be more hands-on and more practical. It's nice to have conferences and big events and global policy forums. It's very important, but we need to get the tools and the small-scale resources to every single person to go and do something and develop this can-do attitude. And thank you, it's been great.
Excellent. And finally, to our class again, youth leadership today versus future. A couple of words.
I don't know if somebody here wants to stand up, and if they do, that's great. I would say at the beginning of my career, students were very naive about how to make change. There was a sense you had to be a lone individual who did heroic things. But I think students today are way more savvy about change occurs through movements.
Exactly.
And that they're interested in being part of movements that may take 40 or 50 years, but will actually have a big impact. So I think they're infinitely beyond where I was and probably where you guys were and certainly where students were 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm very moved by that understanding of how history occurs.
Excellent. And with that, we have reached the conclusion of our live Google Hangout. And although we may be out of time now, the conversation does not end online. So follow more updates at #Action2015. Join the conversation. I want to hear what you have to say. We all do. And follow me personally at US Youth Observer on Twitter. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you to our panelists. It's been great. And hopefully we can hear from you online. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.